What's up, YouTube? I'm Mike, and today I'm back with another, it's part 3 now, I think. No, part 3. Not even close. Part 13 of what it's really like to be homeless. This series is starting to finally grind to the end. When I left you last time, I was describing how I had this really freakishly good night in the tent, reading Sam Harris's The End of Faith. This would become kind of a staple for me, really, in the months to follow. Now that I had kind of gotten set up and basically I had a home. You know, I had a home in the woods, and so it afforded me a lot more comfort. I was getting better sleep every night. And I had a place to lay my head, and it was becoming home. Like, you know, the human animal is incredibly adaptive. That's one of the things that I talked about in my What's It Like Going to Prison series. Is that, you know, when you first get in trouble, you go from having never been in any kind of a lockdown facility, and then you find yourself in county jail. That is a brutal thing to have to cope with. It is very difficult to go from a large house or a nice condo, which is what I was living in when I got in trouble, to this tiny, miserable little cell with, you know, locked in there with another person for, I think it was 16 hours a day in the county that I was locked up in. And so, but you adapt very rapidly, and that little tiny cell before long becomes your home. It becomes your place of peace, your place of comfort, and thankfully the human animal is adaptable in that way. And so before long, as hard as it might be to believe, that little 8x8 tiny little dome tent and my little shelter that I had built around it, which apparently has a name, I just discovered. My wife and I have been watching Naked and Afraid XL, and they're in Africa. And what they built as a shelter, if you've ever seen that home, that show, they call it a boma, B-O-M-A. I didn't know that was a thing, but that's effectively what I built around my tent, is a boma. It's just basically like a ring of debris that keeps animals from easily being able to trample through where you are. I didn't have the luxury of having a fire, so I was in the wilderness alone in a tent. And, you know, as I was describing one of my previous videos, I think the last video that I shot, I was explaining how I learned to walk the woods at night without any kind of light, without a headlamp or a flashlight or anything, because it puts you at a distinct disadvantage, because it blinds you. You can only see what's in the sort of cone of your light in front of you, and then anything outside of that is pitch black because your eyes dilate. Once you learn to get comfortable in the woods without a light at night, your eyes, you can actually see very easily in the woods in pitch black dark. Even without the moon out, you're better off without a light. And so I was very aware of this because I would walk the woods at night, sometimes just out of boredom, and I would come across other people in this wooded area. And when they had lights or fires, it was very easy for me to see them and for them to not see me. So now like I said, we're starting to get into the springtime. Temperatures are occasionally, you know, it's Texas, so sometimes it's, you know, 60, 70 degrees. The next day it's 40 or 50. This is probably late February, early April. And so more and more people now, I've basically had this whole wooded area to myself all winter. I don't think I ever came across another human being anywhere in that wooded area the entire first several months I was down there. And then after a while, when things started warming up, leaves start getting back on the trees, people start getting out of their house, I would hear noises in the woods, and I would go to investigate. Another thing that happens when you live in the woods, I guess, it happened to me, I don't know, all of your senses they seem to get amplified. So because you're kind of on high alert all the time when you're in your home, and I think it's probably just, again, adaptation. I know, like, if you go stay in a friend's house, or you stay in a hotel, or you stay in a home that's not yours, and you hear things at night. You hear the creaking, the cracking of the ceiling. There's various different little intricacies, like house noises, that in your home you learn to just dismiss. They don't catch your attention in the same way that if you're sleeping in a strange place, you notice tiny little variations in sounds and you know, creaks or groans or whatever. When you live in the woods, you become attuned to that environment. And because you have little to no protection, your senses are sort of always on high alert for anything that might be a threat. One of the things that I noticed one time that was shocking was I was either in my tent or screwing around outside. Maybe I was sitting on my latrine or mending my shelter. Because that's the thing that also happens is you have a lot of consistent upkeep. So you feed all of these branches. And you've got this ring of trees and stuff where I've driven stakes into the ground, and then you kind of weave into it various different things that are green to sort of build a solid wall. But obviously the greenery doesn't last. The leaves fall off of it. You're sort of constantly doing maintenance on your boma, apparently is what it is. And so I could have been out doing, boma maintenance or whatever. And I caught the whiff of a cigarette. And it's like, well, shit, somebody must be on top of me. So I go, and again, like I said before, I'm in full camo head to toe. I've got a hatchet and a walking stick. This is how I'm traipsing through the fucking woods. So I go off in search of where this cigarette smell is coming from. And these kids were a long way. I could not believe how far into the woods they were when I finally came across somebody that was moving, and I could smell their cigarette from a long way away. Sound carries in the woods. You get used to, your brain starts to dismiss like birds and the usual crickets and the usual night sounds, but anything that's out of place and your brain will pick it up. There was more than one occasion where my creepy ass was, like I said, I was the creepy guy in the woods. I would hear noises in the woods, and I would go and search what was going on. And as I told you in my previous videos where I kind of described the layout of these woods, there was this trail that was wide enough to get a vehicle down. And occasionally, it was very rare, somebody would drive a truck way back into these woods all the way to this property line that I described in one of my past videos that had these huge stones that this landowner had clearly put out to keep people from getting onto his land. So they would drive their truck basically and back it up, relatively close to these stones, and then they would sit up on the stones and they would build a little campfire and they would be down there drinking and fucking partying and shit. And so they'd have a fire going, they'd be drinking, and there was several times, again, like I know it sounds weird telling it now, but when you live alone in the woods, it's not a whole lot of entertainment. So you got to pick and choose what like there's only so much you could do. You get tired of reading books. And I would creep over, I would hear noises in the woods, and it would be kids down there partying. And dude, like, I cannot tell you, there was several times where I was basically sitting, like kneeled down in the woods with my walking stick and my fucking hatchet in my head to toe camo gear, just outside of the ring of light that was being cast off this fire. And I could sit in the woods and just listen and watch these people that were down there partying. Sometimes, one time, I got really, really lucky and they were getting down on the truck bed. And so I sat in the woods watching these young, I don't know how old they were, getting busy on the bed of this truck in the middle of the woods by a campfire in the middle of the night. And so, like, if you're ever in the woods at night, like, be aware, you may not be alone. There could be some psycho, creepy stalker in there. And if you're down there with a campfire and drinking and partying, thinking that you're... there was more than one occasion where I was creeping on people that were down there partying in the woods. One day, coincidentally enough, I was in camp, and I think it was a Sunday. That was one of the other things that sucks about bus routes. Is the buses are obviously primarily for business, and they don't have as good hours on the weekends, and so like a lot of times I would spend weekends or some portion of weekends in camp. And one day I was in my tent or in the area doing whatever, and I smelled marijuana smoke, and I went creeping off to see what was going on. And there was a creek. It was a relatively small creek. Like you could relatively easily hop across it. And I had to do this every single time I came to and from my tent. There were two pathways that crossed this creek. And I'm guessing it was probably, I don't know, 3 feet maybe across, probably 3 feet across. And so it took a good little jump, you know, a decent little hop to clear it. But 99% of the time, that wasn't a problem. We'll get to that in a second. And so it kind of snaked its way through these woods. And where my tent was sort of elevated from the other side of this little creek that ran through there. And so I'm down in camp and I smell marijuana smoke. And so I creep over in my camo and my gear, and I see these kids from a distance. And it was 3 kids. It was 2 guys and a girl. Again, I don't know how old they were. I'm 18, 19, 20, somewhere in there. And they're down there smoking a joint. And so I creep over, and I'm kind of in this little wooded area, and I got too close. And they were sitting down there. I could see it clear as day. There's a guy and a girl, and they're facing they're like in a little triangle. And there's a guy that's basically at the point of the opposite end of the triangle. He's basically looking, he's facing in my direction. And I thought I was more camouflaged than I was. And they're passing this thing around, and suddenly this guy's got in his hand, and he sees me. And you could just feel like the tension. He just snapped stiff. And he's kind of looking at me, and you can only imagine what this guy must have been thinking. And so he kind of goes stiff, and he's holding this joint, which is even more fucked up because they're high, and they've just found some crazy guy in the woods. And he kind of starts whispering like, guys, like look, there's a guy. And so these heads turn, and they see me, and they're clearly like, oh shit. And they're like, oh my God, like, we're sorry, is this your land? And I'm like, no, y'all are cool. No, it's not. It's just like a park. And they're like, oh, okay, well, you want to hit? And I'm like, yeah, why not? So I go down. I cross the little. I have to kind of like slide down this embankment to get down to the creek bed and go across. And these 3 kids that I have no idea, they probably tell this story too, but this crazy psycho guy in fucking head to toe camo that they burned one with. And they passed it, or I took a couple hits, and I was like, all right, thanks guys. Y'all have a good day. And fucking took off and went back to my tent. Worst mistake ever, dude. This is one of those early times in life where I still hadn't figured out that marijuana is not for me. And I laid in that tent in the middle of the day, just super paranoid, all disassociated, and it was miserable. I swore I'd never do that crap again. I felt horrible for hours until it wore off. So this is the kind of excitement that I had. This is the kind of entertainment I had. Basically, wandering around, creeping around in the woods at night, stalking local kids. You know, stumbling onto stoners. Whatever was going on. It's something to keep me busy. But because of this, because I started to realize that this area is not nearly as secure as I thought it was, I began to get more insecure at night. I don't recall exactly when I rigged this up, but I thought about it after I shot my last video. So one of the hardest things about being homeless is sleeping at night, because obviously, you know, you're in this unsafe area and you've got to calm your mind enough that you can actually go to sleep, but you have no guarantee that you're not going to wake up to somebody trying to hurt you or any number of things, you know. Sometimes there'd be terrible storms at night, which of course is actually coming up in the story. But I was very insecure about the fact that all that's between me and the outside world is this tent with this zipper door. And so the door is in a D shape, and it's got 2 zippers, and they zip from the top and the bottom together. So you could zip both zippers all the way to the bottom, or both zippers all the way to the top. And what I decided was that I needed some type of alarm system. That I didn't want to wake up to somebody basically on top of me. That I needed some type of way to have some forewarning about impending danger. But I didn't want to rig up a bunch of like trip lines and shit around my tent because there's lots of animals in there. And so I don't want to be woken up to something that's not an actual threat. I'm only concerned if somebody goes to open the door on this tent. So what I did is I rigged up this basically alarm device. So I took the 2 zippers and zipped them to the center so that they're right in the middle of the door together. And I had this like a safety pin or something that would go through both of the zipper eyes. And I connected that to a little piece of string that I attached to a tin can. And that tin can, I had it measured so that the tin can hung inside, it was suspended inside my metal cooking pot. And so you've got a tin can that's suspended inside of a metal cooking pot so that if somebody moves that zipper, that tin can is going to hit or rattle around inside of that cooking pot, and the aluminum metal made it made a loud noise. I tested this multiple times. So every night before I would go to bed, I would rig up my alarm so that if worst case scenario, somebody tried to open that door, it would start making a bunch of noise and I could grab my little 25. Or hopefully the noise would just scare them and they would go away. Because obviously what most sane people do is wander around in the woods in the middle of the goddamn night, come upon somebody's camping tent and decide to crawl inside of it with them. Obviously that's what's going to happen if anybody discovers my tent. But this just gives you a window into my world. I was concerned that somebody might try to hurt me or might try to get into my tent while I was in there. And so that device is what I rigged up as an alarm. So one night before I had set my alarm and going to the point that I made about the trip lines, one night I'm in the tent, and again, I was trying to get to this earlier and got sidetracked. When you're in your tent and you've got a light source in your tent, your eyes are dilated. And so if somebody's outside of the tent walking the woods, they're going to see this glow from inside your tent. They're going to be able to see your tent or you. Now, admittedly, I had my boma built around it, but it's something I was aware of, that if I was to have to go outside suddenly at night, there would be some time for my eyes to dilate. So in the case of an emergency, I always had a headlamp that I could use so that I would have immediate light. And so one day I'm laying in the tent reading a book. I think I was reading the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey. I actually read every single book that he wrote. They're phenomenal. If you've never read them, you definitely should. He founded the Church of Satan, which of course has absolutely nothing to do with devil worship. A lot of people don't realize that. But anyway, Anton LaVey, I was a big fan. And so I'm laying in the tent one night, and it's nice and quiet. There's maybe some crickets or something going, and I'm probably eating a Snickers and enjoying my book, and I'm laying in there, and suddenly I hear, I'm like, holy fuck, what is that? And it just kept slowly and steadily like. And it sounded exactly the way you would expect it to sound if somebody was slowly walking through those fucking leaves. It was just the sound of leaves crunching as something that sounded very bipedal was slowly approaching my tent. So you hear this sound, it's the middle of the night, you're in a lit tent, your eyes are dilated, and it sounds to you like somebody is slowly approaching this tent. My heart starts fucking pounding in my chest. So immediately I cut my light off. So now I'm in the dark. And the light going off does not stop or deter the sound. There may have been like a hesitation, but then again comes the and that shit's getting closer and fucking closer. And so this is an experience that I don't know if you've ever had. This is what they call the fight or flight response. In all animals, I guess, every sentient animal has what's called the fight or flight response. When they are facing danger or impending doom or whatever, this engages your fight or flight response, and you typically either fight or flee, fight or flight. My wife will tell you that there's actually the fight, flight, or freeze response. Because apparently some people in this environment don't fight or flee, they just absolutely freeze in place. I guess maybe there's animals that do this, like a possum would be kind of an example of a freeze where they just roll over and play dead. I found out that night that of the fight or flight response, I am decidedly of the fight option. My attitude is that if I'm gonna get taken out by something, I'm gonna get taken out on my fucking feet. I'm not gonna just be cuddled up in the tent crying like a bitch, hoping to God that something doesn't hurt me. Like, I'm gonna go out standing the fuck up. And so I'm huddled down in my tent. I got my light off. The sound is approaching. I get my 25. I fucking cock it, and I'm sitting there, and my heart is just pounding out of my chest. And the only option for me is, this is go time. Like, this is it. Like, you've got to go. You cannot stand in here any longer and let this person get any closer to you. You've got to do something right now. And so, again, luckily, I didn't have my alarm rigged up yet. I get my headlamp on. I get to my door, and in one fucking motion, I unzip the door, pop on my headlight, and jump out of the tent with my gun. It was a fucking armadillo. It was a fucking armadillo. I have no idea how a four-legged animal could possibly make a sound that literally sounded like there was a fucking Yeti outside of my tent. But you can imagine, like, I am so amped up from the adrenaline because I think that someone has finally come to take me out of this camping site. And so I bust out of this tent with all this adrenaline, gun raised, ready to go to battle with whatever the hell is out there. And it's this tiny little fuck armadillo who is probably shitting himself because he doesn't know what's going on either. And dude, like, when you have an experience like that, the adrenaline is so high, and then it's just this massive roller coaster ride. You just fall off the cliff because it's instantaneously you realize this is no threat at all. But it is an extreme kind of just, like, I just laughed at myself. It made me feel completely, just like I feel now. Like, I had built up the boogeyman in my head while I was sitting in that tent thinking that this is it. I'm about to go to war, and it was absolutely nothing but an armadillo. This actually occurred again when my wife and I and my kids were camping not too terribly long ago in Pagosa Springs in Colorado. What did we hear that night?
Can't remember if we ever figured out what it was.
Did it sound like somebody was walking, or I thought it was a bear or something?
We thought there was maybe an elk. We were scared of the elk.
Because we heard the elk bugling or whatever it was. And then I don't remember what the hell we heard. I had a gummy on top of everything. I had a weed gummy, and I was already like, I'd massively overdone it. Like, I had developed a tolerance, and so I would take, I don't remember what the dosage was, and then I tried to go back to that same dosage, being somebody who cannot tolerate THC, and I was already in full-blown panic mode because I fucking overdosed. And I'm laying in this tent, and so that probably had a lot to do with it, because, like, I was tweaking anyway. And
we were in the middle of a marriage-ending fight?
Yeah, we were in the middle of a massive fight, and then there's this sound outside the tent, and I had a game camera outside the tent that I could monitor remotely from my phone. And so I had pulled the game camera up on the Wi-Fi. We were camping, we had Starlink internet and a Wi-Fi powered game camera, so I could be laying in the tent and get on my cell phone off the Starlink with the Wi-Fi, and I could monitor my game camera, so I could see that there was nothing in, like, our campsite. But it sounded like what it almost certainly was a cow. Where we were camping was in this free range cattle area. There was fucking cows all over the place. I don't know what the hell it was, but again, you know, our eyes were dilated from laying in the tent. I think we were watching something on, well, at that point, I think we were going to sleep. We'd been watching something on a laptop, and I hear this sound, and I was not going to lay in that tent and just get trampled by some animal. And so I busted out of the tent into the middle of the night, you know, looking for fucking danger. I never saw anything. I don't know what the hell it was that was out there, but it was nothing there was nothing. It was nothing to actually be concerned about. So that's just another like little weird experience that sticks out in my mind because I thought there was impending doom and it ended up being nothing. As the guy Ray had said, what I would eventually discover over being down there for almost a year was that I was the crazy guy in the woods. There was nobody that wanted any part of whatever the hell was going on down there. Occasionally, I remember one morning I got woken up to the most god-awful fucking sound. I could not figure out what the fuck this loud-ass racket was. And whoever owned that land that was right behind my tent, they had decided to come enjoy some of their land, and they were riding dirt bikes around in circles right behind my fucking tent. The audacity of these people to be using their land right beside where I was, what do you call that? Squatting right beside where I was squatting in my tent. And so I creeped under a bush, into a bush, and watched these guys ride dirt bikes for a while before they finally fucked off. Yeah, it was always something. I learned while living in a tent that the most god-awful, horrible creature ever made by man is also, unfortunately, one of the most beautiful creatures, and that is a fucking blue jay. I cannot tell you the number of rocks that I threw at blue jays because these sons of bitches would wake me up at the butt crack of dawn, just constantly running their mouths all around my tent. That was the thing that sucked about the spring is in the winter, everything was nice and quiet. There was no animal activity. There was no human activity. I had this entire little world completely to myself. And as spring came, like I told you in the previous video, I got the bugs, the spiders. Eventually, I had to be just every single day completely doused in bug spray because it was, the mosquitoes in the woods are horrific. This actually is where I discovered my go-to bug spray. A lot of people use DEET. And if you've used DEET very much, you know that DEET eats the shit out of certain, you don't want to like have it all over your skin and touch the leather in your car. I think it will eat some kinds of plastics. It's great. It's a really good bug spray, but it fucks up surfaces really easy. And there's another substance, I don't know how you pronounce it. It's either picaridin or picaridin, that is, it's actually, in my estimation, better than DEET because it keeps fleas and ticks away. You can spray it on your clothes and it's active. You can cover yourself in it and it does not have that nasty DEET feel. It doesn't damage any camera gear, plastics, leathers. It's far and away better than DEET. So if you are currently using DEET, definitely try picaridin or picaridin, Picaridin, I think is how you spell it. It is substantially better bug spray. That all being said, what eventually became another harrowing experience that I think I will save for the next video is that again it's coming into spring, which means weather is coming, and so I've had a relatively docile winter. No snow. It was a very mild winter, and then all of a sudden the rains come, and that presents an entirely different set of fucking things to be worried about because you're completely surrounded in trees that can fall on you, and the only way to get to my tent is across one of two river crossings, and when the rain comes, the river swells, and I did not find that out until I got trapped on the other fucking side. So in the next episode, I will tell you about my harrowing river crossing attempt and what happened the night that the rain decided to come in about 45-degree weather. As always, thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next one.